Committee members, next on today's agenda, we'll go to Representative Meeks. You ready to present your bill? The House Bill 1568. We do have someone signed up to testify in this bill. Representative Meeks, you're recognized to present your bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do have that handout, so we'll let them get that passed around. And while that's happening, I thought I might share my verse of the day with the committee. At Psalms 37:5 says, "Commit thy way unto the Lord, trust also in him, and he shall bring it to pass." So, trying to lighten the mood here in this late hour, right?
And you did.
Yeah, a good dad joke for you. All right, so House Bill 1568, this deals with daylight savings time, and hopefully y'all understand why I wanted to run this bill today. Over the years, when bills have been presented to the legislature to allow us to go on to permanent daylight savings time, I have in the past supported those efforts because, you know, hey, who doesn't like that extra hour of sunlight in the evening? But as I've researched this issue more and more thoroughly, I've come to understand just how harmful that is. Daylight savings time is actually a failed federal government program that is harmful to the citizens of this state. And what I'd like to do is take a little bit of time to explain why that is. Unfortunately, it's going to require 1 or 2 quick science lessons, but I explain this to my 5th graders when I'm doing planetarium programs, so hopefully this won't be too bad. So in the sky, there's an imaginary line that runs from due south to directly overhead to due north. And this line is called the meridian. And the meridian basically just divides the sky in half between the eastern half of the sky and the western half of the sky. When things are on the eastern half of the sky, as we all know, they're rising. So the sun rises in the east. It'll hit its highest point on the meridian, and then it begins to set in the west. And what we would do as far as timekeeping is we might say that after the sun's passed the bottom of the sky and it's been on the eastern half of the sky, we might say that the sun has been 10 hours anti-meridian. Anti-meridian, just the Latinized word that means before the meridian. Around noon, the sun will cross the meridian, and then 2 hours later, we might say that the sun is 2 hours post-meridian. Now, we humans don't like to go around saying 2 hours post-meridian, 10 hours anti-meridian, so we abbreviate those to AM and PM. So when you say 2 p.m., what you're actually doing is you're describing the sun's position in the sky. When you say 10 a.m., you're describing the sun's position in the sky. And this goes all the way back to the time when we use sundials for timekeeping. Now, the way that comes into play in the human body is, and I'm actually trying to shorten my presentation here because I know that the hour is getting late. The human body is designed by God for a 24-hour clock. Our metabolism, our circadian rhythm, sorry, it's getting late. Our circadian rhythm is designed and operates on about a 24-hour-and-a-half day. So 24.5 hours is what our biological clocks are synced to. Well, every morning when the sun comes up, the morning sun gently pulls us from that 24.5 hours back to 24 hours. And that only happens because of that important morning sun. When we go to daylight savings time, what ends up happening when we lose that hour, what we're doing with our biological clocks is we're trying to pull it back to 23 hours. And day after day, instead of allowing that 24.5 hours to take place and the sun nudges back onto 24 hours, we're forcing it back an hour and a half, day by day by day. And studies show that we never fully adapt to daylight savings time. And that's why all of us, over the last couple of days, have felt jet lagged, if you will. We've felt tired. It's because of that effect. And if you look in the materials that I gave you, and flip over a couple pages, when that occurs, We're going to go over past to those who have endorsed standard time. Because of that stress on our body, it leads to increased cardiovascular incidences. It leads to other medical emergencies. And so because of that, if you look at this list, the American Academy of Cardiovascular Sleep, the Neurology Academy, the American Academy of Sleep Medicine, the American Medical Association, all of these have endorsed going back to and staying on standard time. Now, a little bit of history. Daylight savings time was started, actually, if you got to go all the way back to World War I. In 1918, Germany was the very first country to go to daylight saving time, and they did it under the pretense of saving energy. The thought was more daylight in the evening hours, people would use less energy, and obviously they were still recovering from World War I. Well, during that time, because the League of Nations and all this globalist movement was going on, other countries, including the United States, adopted daylight saving time for the first time, again under the auspice of we're going to save energy. It was only in effect for a couple of years. It was done away with. And then in the late 1960s, we went back to doing daylight savings time. And in the early 1970s, the whole idea of going to daylight savings time year-round became very popular. It's kind of like we've seen this kind of move today. They did it, and some of you may be old enough to remember, I have vague recollections of this in the early 1970s. The nation actually did adopt daylight savings time year-round. But if you look on, it's like the third page over, there's some newspaper articles, bids to kill daylight savings time heard. In less than 3 months, because of the negative effects of daylight savings time, there were moves in Congress. This daylight savings time went from an 80% approval rate down to into the 30s almost overnight. And they repealed it. And the reason why is because there were serious moves in Congress yesterday to repeal year-round daylight savings time, which has only been in effect for 3 weeks. And the reason why is because school children have been endangered. 8 school children have been killed in pre-dawn accidents. So because of that, we went back to where we are today. And ever since then, we've been going back and forth between standard time, daylight savings time, standard time, daylight savings time. Now, if I were to conduct a poll and ask everybody, do you like going back and forth? I think the consensus would be we all hate going back and forth. The only real question is do we stand on daylight savings time or do we stay on standard time? Standard time is natural time by the sun. Again, the American Medical Association says for far too long we've changed our clock in pursuit of daylight while incurring public health and safety risk in the process. Committing to standard time has health benefits and allow us to end the biannual tug-of-war between our biological clocks and our alarm clocks. Data shows that the sudden change from standard time to daylight savings time in March is associated with significant public health and safety risk, including increased risk of adverse cardiovascular events, mood disorder, and vehicle crashes. Some studies suggest that the body clock does not ever fully adjust to daylight savings time, even after a few months. The American Academy of Sleep Medicine, which is the next page over, says that daylight savings time has been shown to lead to chronic sleep deprivation amongst adults and adolescents. Research has found that adolescents get less sleep and had longer reaction times, increased lapses in vigilance, and increased daylight sleepiness following the switch to daylight savings time. We need the morning light to get our clocks back to our biological circadian rhythm reset. But what happens is when we put that extra daylight in the evening, we need that fading evening light to get our bodies ready for sleep at night. And when we push that light back an hour, that pushes our body's readiness to sleep. And studies have shown that people on average get 20 minutes less sleep during daylight savings time. When I asked our colleague, Representative Lee Johnson, who, as you all know, is an emergency room doctor, about this issue, I was expecting him to tell me about these cardiovascular events and so forth. But the issue that he brought to me of concern was that studies show that teenagers actually have trouble learning when we require them to get up early for school. And it goes back to what the American Academy of Sleep Medicine said here. And teenagers would learn better if school was from 9 to, say, 4 instead of 8 to 3. Well, what we do on daylight savings time is we force them to get up an hour earlier, which increases the problem, and we do it right before we ask them to take standardized tests in the spring. And so we put our teenagers and our students at an even greater disadvantage. The Bloomberg editorial here talks about the economic impact. According to, by one estimate, the time shift costs the economy some $400 million annually. So where does that come from? The extra hour at night has often been touted as being beneficial to the leisure industry, which is probably true. But that comes with a cost. Businesses that generally benefit from morning traffic, those businesses end up suffering during daylight savings time, and productivity issues due to the lack of sleep, the insomnia caused by this is where you get more economic impact, and of course the health issues, you get even further economic impact. And last but not least, the last thing I want to talk about is the whole reason why this was started was energy savings, right? It was a government experiment to try to save on energy. But like many other government experiments, this one has gone wrong. It actually, daylight savings time actually uses more energy than it saves. People use more energy, and there's two reasons why. The dark in the evening that we're trying to fix, well, it's only shifted to the morning hour, so you have to use lights in the morning. And then the other area where you lose energy is people are staying up longer because of the extra light at night, and so people are using more energy during that extra 20 minutes, and it doesn't sound like a lot, but you get millions of people using electricity for only 20 extra more minutes, and it adds up to a lot of cost. So colleagues, I know it's getting late and I've gone on a lot. I will let you know that just yesterday, the state of Tennessee, their Senate State Agencies Committee passed a similar bill to put that state on standard time year-round. In the state of Texas, there is a bill before their General Assembly that would allow the state, the citizens of the state to vote to keep them on standard time year-round. So just let you know, this is not something only being considered in Arkansas. So with that, I will entertain any questions you have, and then I'll have a few closing remarks at the end.
Any questions from committee members? Seeing none, we've got one person signed up to speak against the bill. That'd be Luke Story. Mr. Story, are you still in the room? Okay. I don't see Mr. Story, so Representative Meeks, no questions from committee members. No one else is here to speak for or against your bill, so you're recognized to close with your bill.
All right, thank you, colleagues. And just out of complete fairness, because the hour is so late, what Mr. Story, he and I had talked before them, the same objections that they raised when Representative Richardson ran the permanent daylight savings time bill, that was the same objections he was going to make to this bill, the permanent standard time bill. So that's what that was all about. Colleagues, I'm just going to close with this. Standard time is natural time. All of the rest of nature operates on standard time, and regardless of what our clocks say, our bodies and all of nature is still going to operate on standard time. Out in front of the Capitol, there's a sundial, Y'all still with me? Okay, just checking. I know, it's like, so out in front of our state capitol, there's a sundial. And right now, either that sundial is wrong or we're wrong. Clearly, it's not the sundial. We're wrong. And I'm just going to ask you to have the boldness, have the courage to help me correct that wrong and vote with me to put us back on standard time, on natural time year-round. And with that, I'll make a motion to do pass.
Representative Meeks made a motion to do pass. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed say no. No. The ayes have it. The bill is passed.